Good morning to all our listeners, those of you who have been with us from 6 o'clock this morning, and those of you who are just joining us in our top story segment this morning. We have an extended lined up for you, an extended interview with an Australian journalist and business columnist on the issue of Energy World International, Energy World Corporation, now ranked as the preferred bidder in the 360 Megawatt Project for Jamaica. So it's my very, very great pleasure to welcome to Jamaica Speaks, Michael West. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Trevor. Good to be on the show.
Well, I say to you good night because here it's in Jamaica morning. I think you're talking to us from Sydney, Australia, are you?
That's right. It's 11:15 p.m., but that's early in the evening for a newspaper journalist.
Well, I have to thank you nevertheless for agreeing to join us. Before we get into the substantive issues, it would be helpful for our listeners to know a bit about Michael West, the journalist, because as you know, in matters of controversy, very often those who disagree will seek to discredit the messenger and ignore the message. Tell us a bit about yourself, our listeners.
Trevor, I'm just having a bit of trouble with the line. Sometimes it's absolutely crystal clear, and sometimes there's some background noise, so I had trouble hearing the question then. Could you repeat it, please?
Yes, I apologize for that. I was saying that very often those who may disagree with you or anyone else take refuge in attacking the messenger and ignoring the message. So before we get into the substantive issue of Energy World International, it would be appreciated if you told our listeners something about your journalistic experience and your background.
Indeed. Well, I've been a finance journalist for 2 decades. I've worked with the Australian newspaper. I've worked with the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age newspapers and the Australian Financial Review, so all 3 major finance outlets. I've also done some TV work for Foxtel over here, one of the and its business network. And my main area of expertise is in in a lot of different areas of business, but perhaps I'm best known for exposing, let's say, companies and big business activities which lack credibility and which people that aren't doing the right thing by the others and by the other stakeholders and communities out there, and that's how I came across this company, which is now hitting the headlines in Jamaica, Energy World International.
On that score as well, I should declare and disclose my own interest in that while I'm speaking to you as host of Jamaica Speaks, I'm also Executive Director of National Integrity Action, which has issued a statement and taken a position that EWI ought to be excluded from the bidding process, in which they're now named as the preferred bidder. So as we go into the substantive issue, may I read for you the most recent statement of the Office of Utility Regulation, which is one of the 2 regulating bodies that are responsible for this issue here, the other being the Office of the Contractor General. This statement is issued on October 4. The OUR will now inform the next ranked entity, Energy World International Pacific LNG, EWI, that it has 15 days as of October 4, 2013 to provide its bid bond. As with Azurest Cambridge, conclusion of a formal arrangement with EWI is conditional on the completion of aspects of due diligence on the company and its principals by the Financial Investigation Division, which has been requested to carry out this exercise for all bidders. End of quotes. So that EWI is now about to be contacted, and our concern and interview this thing is in contributing to that due diligence which one of the government institutions has been instructed or requested to carry out. So, may we begin? What drew your attention to Energy World Corporation, and perhaps tell us the relationship between EWI and Energy World Corporation?
Trevor, the relationship is this. EWI is a very mysterious company, and that is the company which is contracting with Jamaica. The company which I have written about is EWC, or Energy World Corporation, which is an $800 million company listed on the Australian stock market here. And over the years, Energy World Corporation has made a lot of claims which have not ended up coming into fruition, coming about. And I have written stories exposing them for their bogus claims. Now, the relationship is that EWI, the company Energy World International, which is doing the deal in Jamaica, it owns about 36% of EWC, or Energy World Corporation here. Energy World Corporation, the EWI is, I believe, 100% owned, or at least majority owned, by Stuart Elliott, who is the chairman of EWC.
Could you pause for one moment, if I may interrupt, Michael? On the website of Energy World International, I'm just quoting this for our listeners who may check this for themselves to substantiate what you're saying. It says here, Energy World International, EWI, is the largest shareholder of Energy World Corporation Limited. EWI has provided funding, management expertise, and technology to EWC. And then it goes on to say, Energy World International is engaged in the business of developing, constructing, and operating in property investment, infrastructure, power generation, and electrical energy-related projects. Just to clarify what you just said and to ground it in the website of EWI itself. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, just expanding on your reading of EWI, that's about it. There's not much more publicly available information than one page on the website of EWC. So this is a private company controlled by one man, Stuart Elliott, who also is chairman and chief executive of EWC. We know a bit about EWC because when you're a publicly listed company, you have to provide statutory information about your activities because you are raising money from shareholders. But Energy World International, there is no evidence to show, even on the website, where this company is domiciled. I believe it may be domiciled in a tax haven somewhere in the Caribbean, but certainly its operations, and we don't know how big these are run out of Hong Kong. And run by Stuart Elliott. So EWC has given money to EWI over the years and contracted to do work with them, but there is no other evidence of any work conducted by EWI anywhere else except for EWC. So money has come out of EWC and gone to EWI, so it's a very mysterious company. EWI. We don't have any public accounts, any financial accounts. All we know is that if you Google them on the internet, you find a claim that they have contracted with the Sri Lankan government to build a $1.35 billion natural gas hub and a port and expand some port facilities in Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka. There are two press releases I've seen, the two stories in newspapers over there, but I rang up the Sri Lankan authorities and was unable to have that story corroborated. So they say they are building, EWI has announced in a press release that it is building this port facility, a $1.35 billion investment, which it purports to be doing itself but it doesn't. This is a company that doesn't even have a website for itself. Just one page on another company's website. So the company that's doing the deal in Jamaica says that it can build a power plant, but there's no evidence of any power plants that this company has ever built. There are only claims in press releases, which I have as yet been unable to substantiate.
The most recent one being in relation to in Colombo, Sri Lanka.
Well, there's more than that, because you see, EWC has claimed that it's building an LNG, which is a liquid natural gas facility, in the Philippines.
Yes.
It has also claimed that it's building something at Abbott Point in Queensland, Australia, an LNG hub facility. It claims that it's building, it's undertaking $1 billion development in Papua New Guinea, which is a country to the north of Australia. I have been unable to substantiate that, but when I did some digging, I found that the tenements on which they were claiming in their presentation materials to be building the Papua New Guinea $1 billion facility were actually owned by or were the property of another company, an American company. I rang them up and they said they didn't know anything about EWC. So here was a company that said, we are building this huge $1 billion development in Papua New Guinea, but when I did some digging, the actual land that they were purporting to build this on was actually owned by somebody else.
That's by
so when I put this to them, I rang them up. I rang the company up, and they were unable to explain. They were unable to respond to questions. I've tried to question them a number of times. I've also rung them to ask them some questions about this Jamaican situation, and they have yet to respond to my calls.
The company, the Papua New Guinea development, which you mentioned, I noticed that in your article of September 29, 2012 in the Sydney Morning Herald, that the acreage is pegged by U.S. oil group Talisman, and Talisman says, we would like to inform you that Talisman has no arrangement with Energy World, end of quotes.
That's correct. Talisman was the U.S. oil company, and they didn't know about any deal with EWC, but it was their land, their tenement, that this facility was supposed to be built on. But you see, I suppose to boil this all down, this company is making outrageous claims about these huge projects it has around the world, and none of them have been substantiated. And if you're building billion-dollar port facilities and liquid natural gas facilities, you probably would have a website, and you probably would have a phone number and the management structure and people that could be contacted. But EWI doesn't have any of this. And so when they bobbed up in Jamaica, and I started getting some emails from your countrymen, it aroused my interest again in this company, EWC. And it's a very serious issue for Jamaica because clearly energy costs are high, and it's a serious social issue. And I'm very concerned that that these people have one preferred bidder status.
What I would like to do, if I may, as we're going up against a break now, Michael, is to perhaps look at some of the big projects that have been mentioned. The one in the Philippines, we take it each by each in turn. The ones in Australia, to see to what extent your own investigations have indicated in relation to each of those, in the Philippines, in Queensborough, Australia, etc. We've spoken about Papua New Guinea, so that our listeners might get as concrete a picture as possible as to the extent of the claims and the degree to which you have been able to ferret out information that corroborates the claims that are being made. We go to a short break now, listeners. We're talking with a business columnist in the Sydney Morning Herald, Australian journalist Michael West, on EWI Speaks. Thank you for staying with us, listeners. We're talking about the headline issue in Jamaica today. We see the front page of today's Gleaner, where one of the bidders is reopening concerns regarding the mechanisms and the process whereby the OUR has reached a conclusion, which I indicated at the beginning of our conversation, that the current preferred bidder who shall be asked to post a bid bond is Energy World International. On the website of Energy World Corporation, we read Strategic Alliances, Energy World International. Energy World International is the largest shareholder of Energy World Corporation, and the website one page tells us Energy World International is engaged in the business of developing, constructing, and operating in property investment, infrastructure, power generation, and electrical energy-related projects. We're talking with Michael West, a business columnist and journalist with the Sydney Morning Herald, who has been involved in tracking the record of EWC over the years. And what we're hearing is that a number of assertions have been made by EWC, whose main shareholder is EWI, regarding building major LNG and power generation projects. And these have had to do with projects in the Philippines, in Australia, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia as well. So my question to Michael before we took the break is for us to go through one by one to see to what extent he has found corroborative or not been able to find corroborative information in Australia, first of all. Michael?
Yes, hello, Trevor.
Yes.
Well, let's just take, for instance, the claim that they're building an LNG hub at Abbott Point in Queensland. I rang the relevant government department in Queensland, and they confirmed that there had been discussions with EWC to build this facility. It would be $1 billion project, or $1 billion plus, but apart from a lot of press releases and a lot of discussion about this project being underway, the Queensland government was unable to confirm that anything more than preliminary discussions had taken place. Now, the thing about this company is they do have two power stations, two small power stations. So they look bona fide. This is EWC I'm talking about.
Yes.
They have a power station in Indonesia, in Sulawesi province, which is, I believe, about 195 megawatts. And they have a tiny power station in Alice Springs, probably enough to power a very big hotel. Alice Springs is in the middle of Australia, near Uluru or Ayers Rock in the desert. This one is at 8.68 megawatt power station. So
8.6? 8.6?
8.68
okay, just wanted to be clear, yes.
So these are far smaller than the proposed development. These actually provide this company with cash flow. It makes a $30 million profit a year, or thereabouts. But all these other claims to be building big port terminals and LNG facilities in Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, other parts of Australia, and so on, these claims cannot be substantiated. Now, if we take one of these claims, for instance, this is the sort of thing that's been going on. One of the claims is that they're building an LNG hub and a power plant in the Philippines. In their 2008 annual report, they said that they were in the initial stages of developing this LNG hub, and it would be finished. It will be commencing operation in July 2010. The next year, the annual report said this would be, it had been delayed a bit, but it would be commencing operation 2011. Then the next year's annual report said that it would commence, so they look at commercial operation in 2012, and then in the 2011 annual report, it said 2012, 2013, and in the latest annual report, just out, it is saying they'll begin in 2014. So this is typical of what this company does. They keep on saying that they're building these things. But of course, these are things that require an absolutely immense capital cost. And I don't know where they're getting the money from, but I do know that money is coming out of EWC and going into Stuart Elliott's private company, which is EWI. They sometimes put pictures of their developments in their annual reports and presentation materials, but sometimes the pictures in their annual reports are proven to be, let's say, without credibility.
Well, I'm looking at the website, the EWC website, corporate profile, and the last date there mentioned in terms of the key role that they've played in the development of the CEPA, which is one of the companies co-founded by Stuart Elliott, 2009, and here I quote, contemplation of Papua New Guinea LNG project. Contemplation, full stop. And you're reading from the annual report to shareholders, which indicates that from 2008, this has been in contemplation, and the latest report says, remind me?
This is for the Philippines or for PNG?
For the Philippines, and then for Papua New Guinea.
For the Philippines, I think they said it's scheduled to commence in 2014. But don't forget, they said originally it was going to commence in July 2010. Now it's more than 3 years later, and there's just no evidence that this is being built. But what's actually happened is the company's shareholders are effectively paying for this, and the money is going out to private companies related to Stuart Elliott, not EWI, but to another company, I think, based in the Philippines. And this is typical of what EWC does. It uses the small shareholders, it raises money on the share market, it says we're doing these fantastic projects, and the stock price goes up, and then they raise money. And then that money goes out to Stuart Elliott's private companies. EWI is one of them, which claim to be providing services such as technology, engineering expertise, and these kind of things. But of course, there's a deep schism between the reality and the imagination of these guys, because there's very little to suggest that they've done anything that they've claimed, apart from running two small power plants that they've had for many years.
Don't the shareholders have the same capacity that you have, or at least if they don't have that capacity personally, to benefit from your investigative work, to see that this report, the reports which I've looked at, the annual shareholders meetings, really have very little substance for Papua? Well,
that's a good question, Trevor. There's a website here in Australia called Hot Copper, which is a share trading website where people gossip about stocks and so on, and companies. And on that website, you don't have to put your name on it, but you can put a pseudonym on it. And every time I write something about EWC, I get criticised by the people posting comments on the website, and they say things like I'm acting in cahoots with hedge funds who are short selling the stock, and so they claim basically that I'm acting fraudulently for some sort of financial gain. And a couple of them have been withheld from posting and been banned for a while, but effectively they get their proxies or their, who knows who are behind these pseudonyms, but they get their people to come up and say how wonderful EWC is and how I'm a very bad journalist attacking the company for financial gain. That's basically the game they play. I haven't bothered going to the regulators here about it because the regulators here, the financial regulators, have a lot on their plate. This is a relatively small company and they're not a very active financial regulator. And so I just carry on when there's a story that I think is in the interest of shareholders.
Have you ever had the opportunity of speaking with Stuart Elliott himself, given the fact that you've been writing about his entity for a number of years?
Well, I have, in fact, spoken to Stuart on a couple of occasions, and he's a very pleasant, charming man to deal with on the telephone. But he doesn't answer the questions because, I'm not sure exactly. Well, we can surmise why he doesn't answer the questions, but there was a piece that I wrote where the last time I spoke to him, I rang up and he answered the phone and he said, his first line was, "What have I done?" and my response was, "Well, what do you think you've done?" So we have a bit of fun, Stuart and myself, and I'm sure that I'm the bane of their existence. I think him and some of his colleagues originally New Zealanders, in fact. But this is a very serious issue, really, and I think it's demonstrable that this company is over-promoted, and its claims are, in the least, greatly exaggerated. And so, when it comes to the Jamaican situation, you have a company whose credibility is clearly, stretched, who now have this preferred bidder status, but they provided no financial bona fides. They don't have a set of accounts, they don't have a website, they don't have a phone number. It would be certainly in the Jamaican national interest to have some transparency for EWI to stump up its financial accounts and to show exactly what its bona fides are.
We've got to take a short break, a final break. Michael West in this conversation. And when we return from the break, I want us to explore a little bit more that issue of due diligence, which is what the OUR is calling on the Financial Investigation Division to do, but which I, as a citizen, and I'm sure all Jamaican citizens, have an interest in not just leaving it up to the government regulator, but also probing this matter in as many-sided a fashion as possible. So we go to the final break in this extended conversation with business columnist and journalist from the Sydney Morning Herald, Michael West. Welcome back. We're talking with an Australian financial journalist, Michael West, about EWC, the company that has now been named as a preferred bidder in providing 360 megawatts for the Jamaican grid. 360 megawatts is more than 50% of our grid, of course, and that means that a lot depends. Each and every household in Jamaica, each and every business, micro, small, medium, and large, has an interest in ensuring that who gets this is able not just to say, but actually to establish the capacity to move the electricity costs from the roughly 40 cents per kilowatt hour that it's at now, down to the teens, 13, 14, 15 kilowatts cents per hour. 14.56 is what EWI bid, their standardized bid price, and the fuel, natural gas. We're talking to Michael. Michael, the puzzle that continues to bother me is how this corporation has managed to raise the funds year after year in annual reports, which says to the shareholders, in effect, we're going to commence, and the next year we haven't yet commenced, we're going to commence, the third year we haven't commenced, and we're going to commence, which is what occurred in relation to the LNG import and export terminal in the Philippines. How do they manage this?
Well, they manage it because they can get away with making these statements because the financial regulators here and the stock exchange have not pursued them because there are a lot of companies on the share market that make exaggerated claims and raise money and on the basis of those claims. And, you know, if you can get people to believe that you are going to build a $1 billion project in Papua New Guinea and a $1 billion project in the Philippines and a $1 billion project in Queensland, you then have a growth story to sell to investors. And they have a very well-known hedge fund investor, a guy called Richard Chandler, out of Hong Kong, who's a major shareholder in EWC as well. And we don't know what he's doing there because the claims that these people make never come true, and so it's a real mystery as to what Chandler is doing there because he has been a very successful investor. But essentially, they make these claims, the stock price goes up, and the higher your stock price is, the easier it is for you to raise more money from shareholders and indeed from banks as well.
So presumably with this EWI now being named as a preferred bidder in the Jamaican to provide the baseload capacity to Jamaica's national grid, this would improve and increase their marketability to shareholders and financiers.
Well, not really, because don't forget, EWI is a private company, which is the major shareholder in EWC. EWI's claims, as you pointed out, on their website, on the EWC website, is about a page long. Mm-hmm. There's some grand claims there, but there's no detail around them. This is a very mysterious, secretive company. There's no management structure published. There's no phone number for it that I've been able to find, and it doesn't have its own website. And I think it's exceedingly mysterious that a company that purports to be building billion-dollar facilities all around the world doesn't actually have its own website or an obvious telephone number.
That's absolutely strange. Which then makes me even more puzzled. But let me not say what I was about to say as to how they could have gotten this far in our bidding process. But what would be your recommendations to the Jamaican Financial Investigation Division, to Jamaica's journalists, to Jamaican community in pursuing due diligence in respect of EWI? What would be the questions we should be asking? Where should we be going? Stuart Elliott comes to Jamaica in another few days. What should he be asked, to the extent I'm sure he must make himself available for questioning by our Jamaican community?
Well, I think the transparency is obviously key here. What the journalists and all the interested groups need to do is to ask to see EWI's financial statements. Where are they filed? What is its real track record of building things? Because I can't see any evidence of them building anything. The only relationship they appear to have that I've been able to establish is their relationship with EWC. Is it that EWC is their only customer? They're controlled by the same man. But it's simply the essence of this is just transparency for it. If they're going to bid credibly to do this very important job in Jamaica, they need to be able to produce financial statements to show that they're not a house of cards.
The international consultant Mott MacDonald, are you familiar with them? They were involved in the ranking, both the review and the ranking of the various bidders. They appear to be a reputable international.
I'm not familiar with them, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to ask that because they were involved in the ranking of the bids that were made in relation to this request for proposals. And in fact, it's an unsolicited proposal is what it was initially indicated as, and then it turned into an expression of interest in relation to EWI's concern and involvement with the Jamaican project. So, many questions, Michael. Are you going to be doing any further work on this dimension of EWI, EWC's relationship, since you have tracked them literally across Asia, the Philippines, Australia, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia? You're going to be tracking the Jamaican case?
I am indeed, Trevor. I'm planning to write a piece tomorrow. I'm not sure when I will file it, but I'm going to write a piece precisely on this Jamaican situation, which is so intriguing. And I will also mention the Sri Lankan claims as well, and basically put the acid on EWC and EWI to stump up some information to prove that they're a credible company able to do this job.
The Sri Lankan claim. Reflect with us on that one.
Yeah, the Sri Lankan claim is I've got it here in front of me now. They earlier this year, some stories arose in the Colombo press. I'll read this to you very briefly. Yes. September 6, Colombo. Hong Kong-based liquefied natural gas LNG power generator, Energy World International, will invest up to US $1.35 billion to establish an LNG terminal and a power plant in Sri Lanka, according to industry reports. The firm has reportedly been granted cabinet approval last month to set up an LNG hub terminal in the Colombo port. According to the Energy World International, the LNG import receiving terminal will act as a hub for onward distribution of LNG throughout Sri Lanka. I rang the Sri Lanka Ports Authority to establish at what stage this development was at, and they didn't respond to the query, and neither have EWC. And of course EWI doesn't have a telephone number that I can find, so I haven't been able to ring them directly, but it's Stuart Elliott, it's the same as EWC, basically put the acid on EWC and EWI to stump up some information to prove that they're a credible company, and we've had no response on Sri Lanka. And I've also emailed him about Jamaica, and there's been no response on Jamaica either.
That story you just read says they had cabinet approval. Isn't it possible to find out from the Sri Lankan cabinet to confirm or deny that story?
It certainly would be. I haven't gone that far yet. I just called the Ports Authority. But certainly it does warrant further investigation, and that might be an avenue for yourself.
Absolutely. We're going to be following the story as well. I would very much be happy to have Stuart Elliott himself on this program, and I've been trying to track his contact details. Since you have an amicable relationship with him, You may want to provide us with his contact details off air, because we would love to ask him some of the questions that arise from this conversation.
And we've had no response on Sri Lanka. And I've also emailed him about Jamaica, and there's been no response on Jamaica either.
That story you just read says they had cabinet approval. Isn't it possible to find out from the Sri Lankan cabinet to confirm or deny that story?
It certainly would be. I haven't gone that far yet. I just called the Ports Authority. But certainly it does warrant further investigation, and that might be an avenue for yourself.
Absolutely. We're going to be following the story as well. I would very much be happy to have Stuart Elliott himself on this program. And I've been trying to track his contact details. Since you have an amicable relationship with him, you may want to provide us with his contact details off air, because we would love to ask him some of the questions that arise from this conversation, and to provide the Jamaican people with the track record of building power plants, LNG systems of the size that we're talking about, and of the importance to our grid.
Indeed. Well, I'll be in touch. I've sent you already some contact details for them, their phone number and email address in Hong Kong. And so certainly we should touch base if you get a response from them.
And I'm sure that other members of our journalistic community will probably want to talk with you as well. The relationship between the Hong Kong and the Australian registration. Go back to that again, and the possibility that there is a Caribbean registration for EWI. And to provide the Jamaican people with the track record of building power plants, LNG systems of the size that we're talking about, and of the importance to our grid.
Indeed. Well, I'll be in touch. I've sent you already some contact details for them, their phone number and email address in Hong Kong. And so certainly we should touch base if you get a response from them.
And I'm sure that other members of our journalistic community will probably want to talk with you as well. The relationship between the Hong Kong and the Australian registration. Go back to that again, and the possibility that there is a Caribbean registration for EWI.
Well, I know that his other major company, private company, that benefits from contracts with EWC, EWI is one private company, and I can't find a domicile for that. I think it was probably in the Caribbean somewhere, British Virgin Islands perhaps. Mm-hmm. But his other company, Slipform Engineering International Hong Kong Limited, I believe he owns at least 90% of that. I've been unable to. They make tens of millions of dollars from EWC, from the public company, by apparently providing engineering work. This company's name is Slipform, and it is was based in the British Virgin Islands. It may have changed its domicile now to Hong Kong, but certainly they're low-tax jurisdictions and predominantly majority owned by this one man, Stuart Elliott. And these are the companies which make a lot of money from the public company, which has its shareholders mostly in Australia. So these guys are registered in Australia. EWC is registered in Sydney. It's headquartered in Sydney, but it's actually, the offices are in Hong Kong and the executives live in Hong Kong.
Michael West, we really do appreciate this extended conversation, and I'm happy to hear that this is the beginning and rather than the end of the interest in this extremely important issue for the Jamaican people not just a matter of government or the authorities, but every household, every business, micro, small, medium, and large, has an interest in ensuring that we don't make a wrong move in getting our electricity costs down to competitive rates. Thank you so very much, and we'll be in touch. Really appreciate you coming on this morning.
Thank you very much, Trevor. It's been a privilege to come on the show.
Thank you. That was Michael West, Australian journalist, business columnist with Sydney Morning Herald, talking with us about the EWI-EWC relationship and the evidence or absence thereof of the capacity to do what we in Jamaica would wish to be done. And it's part of our country's due diligence and Jamaica Speaks contribution. Stay with us.